Welcome to the yearly visual novel tier list video for 2025. You all know the deal. I'm going to cover every single visual novel I read this year, ranking them starting from the bottom worst to the absolute best of the best, with an awards ceremony at the very end for top personal recommendations. For those new here, hi, my name is August and I talk about anime visual novels. I've read over 150 visual novels, good, bad, and everything in between, in order to help you find a great visual novel to read. We've done this many years before, and this year's no different. So let's start off with the worst visual novel I read this year, a title with a lot of potential, but poorly executed. A paranormal story about a serial killer claiming to murder people to feel something, only for him to find his true love at first sight. Perennial Dusk Kinsenka. This visual novel is certainly an interesting one. It's why I picked it up, not knowing the frustrations I would end up having about it. The story is about Sai Tachibana, our high school serial killer who claims he's incapable of feeling human emotions, until one day he has a chance meeting with an aloof yet beautiful girl, Benio Matsuri, where for the first time in his life, his heart is struck with the feelings of love, leading him into a world of eternal twilight full of exorcists that deal with the spirits of the dead. Despite the main character's profile, this should have been right up my alley as someone who loves character-focused introspective dramas. But what I read was bad. The pacing is torturous. Characters talk endlessly about philosophical concepts without moving the story forward, and repetitive internal monologues drag everything to a crawl. It also doesn't help when the serial killer protagonist is overall an extremely hard sell when its methods remain questionable all throughout the story. I've never felt so frustrated reading this. That said, there are some genuinely compelling elements in here. This is an introspective character-driven story about people with emotional trauma searching for meaning and happiness. You get to explore the characters and their relationships in depth, and how deeply each person cares about the people close to them, despite their own misfortunate circumstances. There's some genuinely moving material in here about healing trauma through passion and connection. I can only strongly recommend this title if you're a fan of the author, Yukito Urishibara, and his previous works, Irotoridori no Sekai, The Colorful World, and Sakura Moyu as the knight's reincarnation. As for everyone else, maybe not, but feel free to check it out if you're at least somewhat curious. I recognize the potential in this title, but I just did not enjoy reading this. C tier. If you're looking for a short, pure love anime romance that's all sweetness and charm, KANADE might just hit the spot with its utterly adorable heroine. In a post-apocalyptic world overrun by greenery, Yuto finally meets his pen pal KANADE in person, only to discover she's a half-human, half-alien with a mission to save the world by falling in love and singing the ultimate love song. KANADE's greatest strength is simply how incredibly charming KANADE herself is. Her bubbly personality, adorable expressions, and those sweet little celebration dances make her an absolute delight to watch. Here, the story explores the process of our couple working through their feelings for each other. You'll see Yuto's thoughtful reflection on whether he truly loves her, and the fact that she's part alien with a rather strange mission, as well as KANADE discovering what love means to her. This is a visual novel that's more about these two's relationship. Saving the world just so happened to be a convenient byproduct. That said, don't expect deep complexity or heavy conflict. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but me personally, I wanted more. Something thought-provoking, exciting, ambitious, mystifying, remarkable, or perhaps even controversial about it. KANADE doesn't have any of that, which is a downside. That's why I'm gonna give this a C tier. Speaking positively, this story is comfort food for wholesome romance lovers. And for an 8-hour visual novel, it's a perfectly pleasant, lighthearted experience that prioritizes sweetness over substance. The story is fine and it looks beautiful, but the visual novel itself is ordinary and doesn't stand out. And nowadays, that doesn't cut it for me, unfortunately. Select Oblige is one of the romance visual novels of all time. I had an okay to meh experience with this one, but I do think I went in with this with wrong expectations given the premise. The story follows Nagi Fuano as he receives a lucky ticket to Ogen Academy, a school for students of the established, privileged, and elite, with a guaranteed success in life after graduation, and it's Nagi's one-of-a-lifetime opportunity out of the slums. However, the Academy's student council, the elite of the elite, aren't gonna make his life easy, so it's up to Nagi to claw his way up to the top to secure himself a future. Sounds pretty hype, right? An underdog story where our main character has to use his street smarts to level the playing field against those more richer, cunning, and intelligent than him. But in actuality, It really was just a typical rom-com. I do have to give credit where it's due. The heroines are pretty cute and charming. It's been a while since I read a Yuzusoft title, and they take proper care to make sure their girls are attractive and lively. Eve and Kukuru are my favorites in here, although I can't dismiss my enjoyment of Kaname's back and forth banter with Nagi. That contrast between their positions of the high-class elite and a back alley street rat makes for a lot of interesting interactions. A fair amount of focus is dedicated to the discussion of changing aspirations, wondering what Nagi can do for his future. He's able to broaden his views compared to his initial goals he made back in the slums. It's all thanks to the heroines and this academy, and he's able to do the same in return. There's a high level of intimacy in those heart-to-heart talks, and the couple becomes better partners because of it. I recognize all of this as the quote-unquote big idea that Select Oblige is trying to do, but it really feels like you're just going through the motions of an already cute rom-com with occasional serious drama moments. I will have to caution to anyone reading the English translation, as this translation is pretty ugly with spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, and duplicate text lines sometimes being out of order. It's as if this visual novel was given one QA test pass and then the game was sent out the door. As for the actual story, Select Oblige gets a high C. Next up, Mojika, Truth Rears Its Ugly Head, the cruelest revenge visual novel I've ever read, and a game where the actual publisher for it announces that they have been issuing day one refunds for emotional trauma. Tsuteru Tanizaki, a lifelong bullying victim, acquired one day the unique ability to read minds through the power of word sight. He finally snaps after one traumatic incident involving his crush and ultimately decides to burn everything down. This isn't simply a revenge power fantasy. It's an ugly, raw, intimate exploration of what happens when people are confronted with the harsh truths about themselves and others, told through the most visceral presentation imaginable. Mojika is incredibly rough. There's plenty of brutal material in here that had me physically uncomfortable. While it's not as fantastical as infamous visual novels like Euphoria and Magabates are, these scenes are equally as extreme and distressing. The voyeuristic explicit torture scenes by a very unsympathetic main character had me reeling in disgust from the cruel acts being done to the people in here, both with Tsuteru as the victim and the perpetrator. It is very easy to peg this as a glorified fantasy where a guy cruelly takes his revenge on the women in here. I don't doubt the people who see it like that. And yet, what makes Mojika really interesting is in its unique first-person presentation. You see the world through Tsuteru's eyes through very immersive camera work. Visually, you'll get to see his thoughts up front, as well as witness his superpower, how he sees it, text flooding the screen in a variety of different ways. I've honestly never seen anything like this before in a visual novel. This feature is also used to develop and alter the story. Choices are made by choosing whether or not Tsuteru chooses to look up, to read someone's mind to see their true inner thoughts, or to deliberately look away from it. This actually ends up being this physical way of showing his dilemma about facing the harsh truth, each decision impacting him. All of the heroine routes are actually twisted in its own special way, but strangely enough, it is both Tsuteru and the heroine reaching their full potential as they learn to embrace their real selves through facing the raw, unfiltered truth, regardless if the end result is good or bad. Now, I will have to say, there's a couple of narrative choices in the last two routes of the game that I found very questionable. I personally did not like the major plot point regarding why everything happens in here due to how absurd and nonsensical it was. Really, the last two routes of Mojika was a turnoff because of how messy it got in the end. Mojika is, in gigantic quotation marks, interesting with its presentation. I don't think it's good as a whole though. This type of game is not up my alley, but I'm down to at least check out whatever creative endeavor Nitro Plus chooses to make. It's really one of a kind, a morbidly curious experience you can't find told anywhere else. Definitely not for everyone though, given the extreme content. C tier. Dead Days is a zombie horror visual novel, but like, not in the traditional way, where instead of fighting zombies, it's about reflecting about one's own life after being revived from the dead, but with plenty of dark, mature content and horrific gore added to it. After dying a rather pitiful death, our main character Teru realizes that he and 3 other people have been brought back to life by a mysterious organization. The organization offers to extend their lives on one condition: they must eradicate beings known as specters on their behalf, and failing to comply means dying instantly. Through each of the characters characters, you'll see their various perspectives as they are stuck in this unfortunate situation. Now that they are living on the brink of death, it makes them fully aware of their lives and their relationships. They'll slowly piece together what's really important to them and truly ask themselves, why do they not want to die? Or alternatively, what's worth continuing to live for? Instead of being a zombie thriller like I expected, the story takes on a more introspective life or death drama spin to it, which I personally like more. Everything else that Dead Days offers, however, is more questionable. There's a lot of background details surrounding their revival in the first place, such as the reason why it exists, how it works, and the organization behind it. The story takes a fair amount of time to explain what's happening behind the scenes, which is fine, but it's not very interesting, / it wasn't compelling enough for me to really care about it. There's also that big glaring warning I mentioned at the beginning. For those unaware, Dead Days is developed by ClockUp, the same people who brought you Euphoria and Magabates, two of the most infamous brutal ero gore visual novels out there. This title isn't as ruthless as those, but there are some rough scenes in here, so you should steer clear away if you don't want to read any of that type of content. However, my personal problem is that they also tend to be explicit scenes that feel very unnecessary. The writers come up with this weird convoluted way to tie it all together, but it really comes across as desperately trying to add 8 scenes for reader gratification and shock value. Related to that last one, there's a particular scene in here that made me want to get my eyes bleached. Out of all the ClockUp titles I've read, Dead Days was my least favorite. That change in direction, shifting it to being a life or death drama, while still having that brutal edge to it, was fresh and interesting, but I even think hardcore ClockUp fans might just end up passing on this one. C tier. Next up, Hatoful Boyfriend, the visual novel dating simulator where you can date pigeons. A parody game that will give you that anime rom-com otome dating experience. But out of all of the parody games I've played, I'm not kidding, this one is my absolute favorite because of its final route that certainly surprised me. What's amusing is that you aren't a female bird cooing other birds, but an actual female human. It plays it straight as a trope-heavy otome game with lots of male bird love interests. However, this is easily the worst part. The actual dating portion is bare bones, lacking, and it's cumbersome to go through the visual novel in general. And yet, the route endings in Hatoful Boyfriend ended up becoming more compelling and emotional than I honestly ever expected, leading into the final true route, the main reason why you should play this game. The BBL route is straight up genuinely a really good story. The game spends a lot of time being outright comical, but then it slowly draws your attention to the grander story and world building in the background. You wouldn't expect it, but the plot twist in this final true route really takes the story to another level, full of intimate backstories and heart-wrenching sucker punches, all while still fitting the pigeon dating sim premise. It's honestly impressive. If you want to know more about it, you can check out my spoiler section in my video covering it. Hatoful Boyfriend gets a B. You might think I'm crazy, but I guarantee anyone who's read this will tell you the exact same thing. That final route is just worth it. Angel Beats was one of the most beloved and most popular anime at the time of its airing, but what you might not know is that the Angel Beats anime actually has a visual novel game adaptation, Angel Beats First Beat, and it's pretty good. The story is pretty much the same. You are introduced to Otonashi as he wakes up in a mysterious afterlife high school with no memories of his past life. Once awake, he meets Yuri Nakamura, the leader of the Afterlife Battlefront, an organization dedicated towards fighting Angel, a quiet and mysterious girl who they believe to be an agent of God sent to erase them. Angel Beats was originally a 2010 original anime series written by Jun Maeda. However, the visual novel game adds in plenty of optional choices, extra story content, and even character routes to some beloved characters. Angel Beats First Beat is a load of fun simply because there are so many optional choices in here. There are plenty of gag joke answers of various degrees of absurdity. Practically every member of the cast in here has their own unique, odd interactions. Even those that didn't get much time in the spotlight in the anime has their own moments to shine, both compassionately and just as outright idiots. What's really interesting though is that some choice decisions will majorly alter the story, and it's pretty amusing to see how it ends up, bad endings included. Now, while Angel Beats First Beat covers the anime's main story, the visual novel also has character routes, specifically Iwasawa, Masushita, and Yui. As for the main story itself, I really like Angel Beats. It's genuinely a great story with great characters. It sets the stage and then creates these standout empathetic moments that just land so well. The Angel Beats visual novel was supposed to be a series, however, due to complications at the time, the project ended up being cancelled, leaving First Beat as the only sole title, which which is a downside. That said, there are the Angel Beats collaboration events in Heaven Burns Red, Key's mobile RPG that dives into more of the female cast. Those events are basically the spiritual successor of the Beats series. I've actually made videos on those collab events, so you can find those linked in the video description down below. For dedicated fans of Angel Beats, or for those interested, I can say First Beat will be well worth your time. That said, the visual novel isn't officially available in English, so you will have to read the fan translation. But for the content itself, B tier. For a supernatural romance story with a little bit of everything, rom-com fun, wacky shenanigans, and emotional moments that hit hard, Tayutama is a fine read. Really, it's an anime rom-com that does a lot of good things well. The story follows Yuri Mito, the son of a family that presides over the local shrine, and on one day, he and his friends discover strange, mysterious ruins, leading them to awaken its resident guardian, Kikurami no Kami no Hime. The deity desires to bridge the relationship between humans and her race, mystical spirits known as the Tayutai. However, Yuri and his friends end up accidentally destroying the ruins and releasing 3 of the most dangerous Tayutai spirits. And so, Yuri is tasked with teaming up with Mashiro, the reincarnation of the goddess, to quell these angry spirits. What I like about Tayutama is that romance is more at the forefront of the story rather than the supernatural premise. Instead of the romance being a subplot to the ongoing conflict, a large amount of focus is actually on the relationship between Yuri and the heroines. There are lots of moments of the couple bonding and getting to know each other more intimately. It just so happens that the supernatural antics also tends to reflect the ongoing love problems between the couple. I will have to make a note, one of the heroines has a very notable amount of melodrama, all caused by everyone's favorite trope in romance, miscommunication. But if you can weather through that storm, you'll be fine everywhere else. In general, these heroines and their routes deliver nice coming-of-age stories. It just so happens that supernatural hijinks and your occasional fight scenes are there to help boost that tension. Tayutama gets a low B. It's an alright visual novel and it does things well enough, but I don't have much else to talk about, which is also a pretty telling factor about it too. The Restless Sheep and the Lone Wolf, a tale of cutthroat lovers, has a pretty unique and intriguing premise, in which an insomniac hitman has to choose between protecting his position as a Yakuza's pet killer, or protecting the one girl who can cure his sleeplessness. And to think, this title is by Clock Up, the same people behind Maggot Baits and Euphoria. But before you dismiss it immediately, this one's actually pretty wholesome, given it's about 2 killers attempting to murder each other before ending up in the same bed together. Here, by condensing this visual novel's name to cutthroat lovers, the story is set in the district of Kabukicho, with plenty of special and unusual individuals residing in the underworld. From our insomniac hitman to morally dubious police officers to retired Chinese gang members to the Japanese mafia to everyone else stuck in between, Cutthroat Lovers is this melting pot of interesting characters and how they all interact together. A lot of relationships in here have varying measures of power dynamics between parties, all in their efforts to obtain or even maintain control of the underworld. And yet, no matter how big you are in the pond, there's always a bigger fish out there. Death is always looming for our characters, and it's a big driving point for our main lead Takeo. It's why he's so interesting. Takeo's got this unique worldview that plays into why he suffers from sleeplessness, and the reason why he has to kill people in order to get some sleep. So when he's faced with the mysterious girl named Azumi, you get to see his world drastically change. Takeo and Azumi are a pretty cute couple to watch, although it's very much Azumi pulling her weight in the relationship. Watching her basically be the loving romantic one to her stoic cold boyfriend is amusing to watch. She's not afraid to be a bit assertive, and she can definitely hold her own, even against Takeo. How the two are able to come together as this dynamic duo in spite of their problems is real charming, especially at the final few moments of this visual novel. It's honestly quite an impressive feat for all 3 endings in the true route to be fitting in their own special way. That said, obvious warnings for this title. This is still a clock-up visual novel with a handful of brutal H scenes and character backstories. To me, these gruesome scenes are the weakest part of the story. Felt too edgy for my taste, really intended for shock value, while also trying to fulfill some invisible H scene quota. Cutthroat Lovers is a story where the actions of one individual sets off a chain reaction, and we are there to witness the mess that unfolds because of it. Now, while that's fine and all, I do think the more intriguing parts are simply how the characters live their day-to-day life, occasionally crossing paths with each other. Which is why I'm thankful that we also have Cutthroat Lovers' sequel fan disc title, Gaiden, to balance things out. Things are a lot more fun in here. Gaiden runs on this episodic nature and plays into the whole, these are the everyday lives of the people of Kabukicho. Some strange, some fun, and some cases interesting in their their own right. I would highly recommend picking this up along with the original game, because while I may not have vibed with a couple of the characters in here, seeing them do their own thing in a less serious environment was fun to watch. It even wraps up in a very nice romantic way too. The Restless Sheep and the Lone Wolf, A Tale of Cutthroat Lovers is my favorite clock up title, and I'm giving it a B. If you're a fan of coming-of-age dramas, or if you're a fan of Laplacien's previous works, you might want to check out Harmonic Reflections, a story about a piano player who can no longer hear their sound, who ends up meeting a girl who has memories of the future. The story follows Aruto, a third-year high school student who deeply struggles with this condition. He attempts to move on, being okay with happily supporting his talented younger brother from the side. However, everything changes when he meets a mysterious girl who claims to have memories of the future, who declares that he will play piano once again. Harmonic Reflections was a nice read. I enjoyed how the story described Aruto's internal emotions about his struggle and how the new girl he meets, Sari, helps him work through those troubles. Reading this gave me the same vibes as when I read Laplacien's other big visual novel, Cyanotype Daydream, a visual novel I ranked as my personal favorite title I read in 2022. Both visual novels invoke that same deeply introspective feeling, and it's also great at establishing that subtle, intimate atmosphere between the couples. Except Harmonic Reflections creates this feeling in a short 8-hour time span. Now, this visual novel does have a fair bit of romance in it, a love triangle no less, but fundamentally at its core, it's about these characters moving on from their troubled past and their previous regrets. I do think that Harmonic Reflections could be more impactful in its delivery, and the first few chapters aren't as engaging, but the story still hits all the right notes, especially given how short this visual novel is. Pretty alright, B tier. Next up, a visual novel game from Alisoft's lesser-known series, the Beat series, where fantasy action and R18 elements blend together, and for this installment, one depicting a fierce battle between the angels and the demons, Beat Valkyrie Ixseal. Our protagonist Sugihiko is the reincarnation of the Demon King, patiently waiting as an ordinary high school student until he regains his powers to take over the world. However, one day he is suddenly attacked by Ixseal, a holy Valkyrie. He manages to escape, only for his closest aide Bezel to immediately betray and take his Demon King powers of the 7 deadly sins. And so, Sugihiko and Ixseal team up to fight back against Bezel and his army, with Sugihiko powering up Ixseal through his last remaining magic, the power of lust. You may think it's silly, making love with the heroines in order to make them stronger, but despite that, the story and characters are actually quite charming. Silly and fun during its slice-of-life bits, passionately intimate during its romance scenes, and intense and serious when the situation calls for it. Think of it like an older supernatural fantasy anime with plenty of fan service. But instead of it being softcore, they go all the way. And here, you are shown up front the results. The gameplay consists of 2 parts, raising up the stats of your heroine through some spicy fun time, and then defeating monsters turn-based style. There's a fair amount of strategy in choosing what stats to prioritize in certain events, and planning out how to build your deck to fight enemies. I found it pretty fair and not super difficult. The game also gives you the freedom to choose what paths you want to develop the girls, being kind-hearted and picking the super wholesome events, or being immoral and choosing the darker H scenes. Yes, there is rough content in here, especially if you lose to the bosses, but there's an option to skip seeing those scenes in the settings. Of course, while those scenes do exist along with very clear bad endings, the real charm is in the heroines and their pure love endings. These girls are really likable, cute, and cool. Sugihiko and Kirika have such a great senpai-kohai dynamic, with Kirika playing the straight man to Sugihiko's whimsical otaku antics, while still being deeply in love with him. Meanwhile, Ixseal has a really good backstory, developing more of the lore of the story, and surprisingly catching me off guard with how in-depth her situation actually is. I had a really fun time with this one. If you want something fantasy related with a bit of that cheeky, silly, spicy nature to it, Beat Valkyrie Ixseal is a solid pickup. B tier. And now, next up, a Yuzusoft romance visual novel, a passionate story where girls from another world and reincarnated souls come to wreak havoc on our cast's peaceful lives, stirring up all sorts of romantic shenanigans. Angelic Chaos Reboot. The story follows Riku Tanakaze, a ordinary student living a normal life until one day a beautiful girl with snow white wings descends to meet him. The girl informs Riku that she is an angel sent from the heavens to search for him, the reincarnation of the demon lord from another world. And thus, Riku's life quickly spirals into chaos as he begins experiencing memories from his past life and encounters visitors from the other fantasy world. But those aren't his biggest problems, as his most concerning ordeal is him getting ED. Yes, it sounds absurd. Riku Tanakaze is a male-focused issue as a result of the angel restraining his demon powers is a ridiculous setup. It's played up to various degrees of absurdities and internal male agony. But here's the thing, beneath that wild setup is actually a surprisingly thoughtful and loving story. Yes, the ED problem creates some hilarious and embarrassing situations for the characters, but it's also handled with care and consideration too. Each heroine has their own unique and personalized approach to helping Riku with his problem, which leads to some really romantic, intimate moments. Outside of that, the story's fantasy reincarnation elements drive the story forward. Whether it's navigating a situationship caused by potential feelings from a past life, to understanding people's real motivations behind traveling to this world, to protecting the girl you love from otherworldly threats, all of them show exactly how these couples truly care for each other. I really like every one of the girls in here. They are attractive and charming, yes, but they also do have very passionate sides to them that anyone who loves wholesome anime romances will adore and find meaningful. To anyone who's read works like Senran Banka, Sanaba Witch, and Cafe Stella and the Reaper's Butterflies, Yuzusoft delivers that exact same experience. So if you're looking for an anime rom-com visual novel with extremely charming girls, all with a dash of fantasy, definitely check out Angelic Chaos Reboot. Although, you might want to check out other particular visual novel storefronts like Jast, Denpasoft, and Manga Gamer, because this title was banned on Steam for unexplainable reasons. B tier. Now, I read Criminal Border Volumes 1 and 2 last year, and I was very surprised. It had a strong premise, the cast was likable, and the stakes kept getting higher and higher. I finished the series with Volumes 3 and 4 this year, giving the series both its absolute best installment so far, and arguably the worst installment of them all. The story begins when our gloomy main character Itsuki accidentally creates a digital hypnotism movie that arouses people's sexual desires. He succeeds in showing the movie to his childhood friend Rin, only to discover her hidden side, a cunning opportunist with a call girl business. Rin enlists him and uses his video to make more money, and he agrees, not knowing that he would end up running face to face with the Yakuza, where the only way to get out is to beat them at their own game. The events that happen in Third Offense take things to another level. Here, Third Offense does an incredibly bold move, but it's done with deliberate story intent to force our characters to act. Because of everything done prior, the Yakuza are finally making moves against them. As a result of that, Itsuki reaches a point of no hesitation to do what needs to be done. And to think, he started out as this anxious, insecure, antisocial guy. The tone becomes a lot more darker due to the events in here, but it was the natural progression for both the story and our character's development. You can really feel the stakes getting higher and higher with subtle tension with every move both parties make. The ending to Volume 3 was a really big standout moment. It's a great cliffhanger that prepped you for a big blowout climactic conclusion in the last installment. But I never got that. Criminal Border Volume 4/Life Sentence ended disappointingly for me. How Itsuki and the cast ended up at the story's conclusion wasn't satisfying to me, even more so given how most of them go through some pretty rough situations in this installment specifically. It's not an outright terrible ending, but I didn't enjoy it after building up this escalating tension for so long. The one saving grace is that Rin serves as the focus character. After plenty of time never knowing what's exactly going on in her head, given that she basically started all of this, we finally get to see her true feelings. But even that doesn't help save this ending. Now, all that said, Criminal Border is a solid crime thriller series, and I recommend it. It's a great story with characters you'll really care about, but you'll just have to deal with an emotionally subpar ending in my opinion. Criminal Border Volume 3 gets an A, while Criminal Border Volume 4 gets a low B. Next up, Putrika First Cut, a very passionate love story that starts out with a girl being burned at the stake. This is a visual novel story drenched in memory loss, painful tragedy, and forbidden love, all set during a time of extreme paranoia of cursed witches and beings of devilry. You follow Lazriel as she wakes up in a place she does recognize with no memories. Very shortly after, she meets Remy, a quiet young man, who, while benevolent, caring, and a bit awkward, remains tight-lipped about her origins and his own as a demon. But it isn't until later that night that she experiences very vivid nightmares of a young village girl with a terrible fate fate awaiting her. Putrika just hits that sweet spot for me for what I personally love to see in fiction. Intimate character breakdowns with a tinge of bittersweet tragedy with a flair for the dramatic. I knew I was going to enjoy this, as Putrika was developed by the same creative team as Meike no Lupercalia, one of my all-time favorite S-tier visual novels. But instead of a multi-heroine route visual novel about theater dramas, Putrika delivers that same atmospheric intensity in a tighter 8-hour kinetic format. What I really like about the story is how the characters shine against such an oppressive society. The historical setting amplifies that suffocating, hostile, paranoid atmosphere, full of religious extremism and village mob mentality. And yet, it's precisely this harsh atmosphere that makes these characters' defiant proclamations of love so powerful. The story also likes to pull you along, operating like a mystery at times to both reveal hidden intimate emotions and set up jaw-dropping twists, in spite of you already knowing the tragic fates that await these characters. If there's one thing I do have to address, Putrika First Cut is technically a multi-part visual novel. However, First Cut works perfectly fine as a standalone title. I absolutely recommend this, especially for anyone who shares my taste for emotionally gripping character dramas. It's bittersweet in the best way, piling on unfortunate circumstances to ultimately present one powerful story of love. Perfect for a short but satisfying read. A tier. Now, altogether, Kara no Shoujo is my favorite murder mystery visual novel series of all time. Kara no Shoujo combines this haunting, atmospheric aesthetic with its Japanese noir investigation narrative, all while exploring the human madness that comes from obsession and paranoia. And in its final installment, The Shell Part 3 Paradiso, you are rewarded with one satisfying, beautiful true ending that perfectly wraps up the series as a whole. It is fantastic, and yet it is also my least favorite installment of the trilogy. Now, it is still very much Kara no Shoujo. Reiji is out investigating gruesome murders while searching for someone very important to him, and he and his team are out there doing their best work. The mysteries in here are just as thought-provoking as the previous ones, and the struggles Reiji and the cast face in here are just as compelling as their previous conflicts. My problem is that I thought Kara no Shoujo 3 had characters that never reached their full story potential, or had characters that had weird story direction. Both new and old individuals who I thought would turn out promising somehow underperformed all throughout the story. I can't really say anything about it without major spoilers, but my full spoiler thoughts are in my specific review video of Kara no Shoujo 3, so if you're interested, go check that out. That said, I don't think that Kara no Shoujo 3 was terrible. I loved the jump in quality in presentation. Kara no Shoujo always looked great, but damn, Innocent Grey really brought their A game. If you compare Kara no Shoujo 1 to Kara no Shoujo 3, it's a huge visual difference, both in graphics and cinematics, and I love it. Really represents that noir aesthetic the series has in its best form. Kara no Shoujo 3 still tells a great story. It is the end to Reiji's journey, and I was perfectly satisfied with it in all aspects. Really, Kara no Shoujo's thematic elements, stellar presentation, and intriguing detective investigations are major reasons why I like this series so much. Even if Kara no Shoujo 3 wasn't as fantastic as I hoped it would be, I can still say that I enjoyed this series and its characters. There's also the fact that the ending sequence of this game is just absolute perfection. One of my top visual novel ending scenes of all time. S tier. And now it's time to talk about a legendary classic. The Muv-Luv series is known as an iconic title among all visual novels, for what started out as a simple harem rom-com transformed into one of the most critically acclaimed visual novels of all time, even directly inspiring works such as Attack on Titan. Muv-Luv tells the story of Takeru Shirogane, a typical school student living a normal life with his childhood friend Sumiga Kagami. However, his world is thrown into chaos when he finds a mysterious girl named Maya Mitsurugi sleeping in his bed one morning, and thus this meeting creates a fierce love triangle that will change the lives of these three characters forever. Now, the actual Muv-Luv game is split into two separate titles/sections, Muv-Luv Extra and Muv-Luv Unlimited, and it's Extra that most people have a problem with, because it is very much a classic rom-com premise full of adolescent school shenanigans and over-the-top humor. It plays it very straight. We have our endlessly pining childhood friend Sumika versus the rich heiress/newcomer rival Maya duking it out for our poor, dense main character. To its credit, Muv-Luv Extra is surprisingly a lot of fun. There's always some over-the-top tomfoolery going on, and the visual novel is very lively in showing you that. However, some people may find the absurd harem rom-com antics dated, stereotypical, tiresome, and overall mediocre. I stalled reading Muv-Luv Extra for at least a year because the actual story wasn't engaging enough to push through. But when I did though, getting to the character routes, I basically read through Unlimited and Alternative in under 2 weeks, only because I finally hit the serious drama aspects. Yes, Muv-Luv Extra is a classic love triangle, but it also tackles the uncovered insecurities of our heroines and shows them overcoming it. It tackles that fatal sense of complacency in romance, feelings our heroines took for granted, that when change happens, completely ruins their world. It's a problem that even Takeru has to confront, and that's especially important as you go into Unlimited, because that's when his life turns from a slice-of-life harem rom-com into a hardcore post-apocalyptic sci-fi military story. The story of Muv-Luv Unlimited is that after waking up one day, Takeru realizes that the town he used to live in is all in ruins. Shocked, he tries to convince himself that this is one crazy dream. But after being suddenly recruited into the UN military to fight the Beta, extraterrestrial aliens who drove humanity to the brink of extinction, he starts to realize that this world is now his new reality. The reason why Extra is so important to read is because of that drastic environment change. You can see the difference between the two worlds, between the atmosphere, the characters, and key events. The story forces him to adapt and shows him learning how to live in this new world. No more of his lazy, comical personality back in Extra. Here, he's going to have to grow the hell up. Muv-Luv Unlimited turns into this coming-of-age story, showing the progression of Takeru's attitude and mindset, and I really admire the story for this genre shift. The ending sequence of Unlimited actually slots itself as one of my favorite visual novel endings of all time. And to think, the writers of Muv-Luv were planning this from the very beginning. Balancing both Muv-Luv Extra and Muv-Luv Unlimited, I am perfectly okay with giving this a B. And that brings me to Muv-Luv Alternative. How I view it is that Extra was the extended character introduction, Unlimited is the training arc, and Alternative is the actual fight. If you love sci-fi, and especially mech fight scenes, you will be treated very nicely here. Alternative doubles down on all of that. Plenty of scientific lectures, comprehensive battle breakdowns, and glorious fight sequences. You'll see these mechs flying all over the place, killing aliens left and right. Alternative really fulfills that rousing kick-ass energy, full of inspiring patriotism too. And yet, I have to give proper credit to Muv-Luv's world building for giving these scenes so much weight and meaning behind it. The visual novel really dives deep into how the worldwide invasion of the Beta aliens affects people, from country organizations all the way down to the ground soldiers. And yet, despite the alien invasion that affects literally everyone, each organization has their own personal priorities that they want to achieve. This ends up creating conflict due to a difference in ideologies, methods, and personal interests. And what's interesting is that no one is completely in the wrong in their judgment/approach. How Alternative discusses these topics really makes you invested into the world and its characters, especially Takeru. All of this political complexity and moral greatness directly affects his mentality towards the war effort, which then becomes a catalyst for further growth and maturity. Muv-Luv Alternative is largely a journey of Takeru's character development. He'll run into a lot of complicated situations, but he'll also meet lots of people that will reassure and inspire him along the way, even through the toughest of times. Because oh boy, there's a lot of painful stuff that he goes through. Alternative is a brutal world, and I say it suffers a bit from character death fatigue. It's very easy to get tired seeing characters die one after another, each one losing impact the more the story goes on. And yet, despite that, the story is still really good at making you emotionally invested into these characters with their meaningful messages. As a whole, Muv-Luv is just one great epic. It's an incredible story, a rousing war tale of military sci-fi, and yet it's also a passionate, bold romance story about love across the multiverse. Muv-Luv Alternative is an ambitious story with plenty of 10 out of 10 moments. And reading everything from Extra to Unlimited makes Alternative that much more worth it in the end. S tier. Next up, a very unusually named title, Hentai Prison. But despite its crass name, the actual story is everything but. It's one hell of a prison break caper crime thriller about degenerate criminals surviving in the cruelest prison system known to man. Hentai Prison, alternatively named Henpri, follows Shuichiro Minato as he finds himself sentenced to 10 years in prison for nude streaking in public. However, the prison he's sent to isn't any ordinary jail. His destination, Tulip Prison, a special penitentiary for deviant criminals, and a hellhole where all basic human rights and decency for the imprisoned is long lost, where survival is now Shuichiro's #1 priority. Despite its odd naming sense, Hentai Prison is a serious title. It's a full showcase of how Shuichiro navigates and exploits the prison system and stands up against all of the prison's brutality, ruthlessness, and injustices. In a world where he's constantly beaten down, you'll see him overcome people more devious, manipulative, and powerful than him. It's a rousing underdog story, and seeing all the feats he does in here is thrilling and exciting. The presentation greatly amplifies this too in its dynamic sprite movements and the soundtrack. That combination of crass absurdity from the premise and the actual content itself should be very familiar if you've read the developer's previous title, Nukitashi. I would actually recommend reading Nukitashi before Henpri because both titles take place in the same universe, and Henpri does have some Nukitashi references in here. The two are very similar in a lot of ways, from its outlandish comedic humor to its exciting, thrilling moments, and even its more serious scenes and messages. Yes, you might scoff at the idea of following degenerate criminals, including our nudist main character. However, Henpri also functions as a character drama, taking the time to really analyze and explore the minds of these type of individuals, what motivations drove them this far, and the backstories surrounding them. Tons of hard-hitting questions are presented and explored all throughout the story. Is brutal punishment necessary to rehabilitate degenerate criminals? Can deviant prisoners even be rehabilitated? And is censorship morally just if it prevents criminals like them from being formed in the first place? Every individual here has their own complex reasoning and complicated backstories that really help form Henpri's messages and ideas. It's very thoughtful and considers perspectives from all sides in order to help better understand each side's arguments. Now, of course, thematic messages aside, Henpri is still a fun, lively story. The characters are extremely likable, the banter between Shuichiro and the heroines is super entertaining, and watching Shuichiro grow and change himself in the process is worthwhile. I do have to say though, the first few hours of Henpri can be pretty grueling and tiresome to watch, simply because it's there to sell how cruel Tulip Prison is. However, I argue it's necessary to demonstrate the willpower needed to survive, find allies, and even break out of this prison system. And honestly, I don't expect anything less from what is basically the eroge equivalent of The Shawshank Redemption. Hentai Prison is an absolute must-read. Fantastic writing, great characters, excellent presentation, all just to create an all-around fantastic visual novel. Top S tier. Next up, a very beloved title, White Album 2. What many visual novel fans could call the medium's greatest romance story. A romance drama masterpiece, and it fully deserves that title. White Album 2 follows the story of Haruki Kitahara, a third-year high school member of the Light Music Club who dreams of performing an original song on concert stage. With only 30 days left until the Culture Festival, he recruits 2 female members, Setsuna Ogino, the school's renowned idol, and Kazusa Toma, the standoffish piano prodigy. As the 3 work together to make the concert a success, their lives become more entwined, resulting in a vicious love triangle that will haunt them beyond their high school years. This isn't a happy-go-lucky, wholesome romance tale. It's a harsh, bittersweet, realistic look into human relationships, with all the ugly baggage shown off on full display. A devastating romance between 3 friends who don't want to hurt each other, and yet are subconsciously wishing for their emotional needs to be met. What makes this work is how well defined and portrayed these characters are as very flawed individuals. Everyone in here behaves in logical ways that make sense with their personalities and motivations. Some characters even behave in self-destructive, manipulative, or straight-up malicious ways. Actions that make them look horrible and even frustrating to some readers, but it's always consistent with their character profile. You'll see all of this explored not only in their actions, but also in their subtle mannerisms and unspoken thoughts. The prose/script in White Album 2 is layered. Yes, it may show show the surface level conversation, but there's always implicit meaning behind every single word. And sometimes the actual characters themselves will even lie to themselves about their own true feelings. It's an intimate story that dives in and explores the full force of these characters' raw emotions, only then elevated by how exaggerated and almost excessively dramatic its big impact events tend to be, and how unfortunate the timing always is. I'm talking conversations being cut off at the most inopportune times, people discovering hidden things they shouldn't have, and even catching someone just at the right time. Passionate love confession right before a plane is about to leave style of drama. White Album 2 is basically the ultimate soap opera in anime form. And yet, for how dramatic this story is, it is dedicated to showing the full transformation of passionate love between individuals, as well as the difficult breakdown of it too. Through each of its heroines, we see many facets of love explored, both the good sides and the bad sides. Really, it's through experiencing this long-winded path full of lies spanning high school to university to adult life that once you finally see these characters overcome their ordeals, it's just so cathartic. My highest praise goes to White Album 2, and I believe it's a visual novel that will stick with you for a very long time. S tier. And now it's time for the lightning round of cool visual novels I want to recommend that I unfortunately was not able to get to this year. The late 90s legendary visual novel from Aqua Plus/Leaf, Two Heart is back, fully remastered in 3D. A heartfelt romance comedy, nostalgic to longtime veterans, and perhaps refreshing to new readers. If you're looking for something big to really dive into, check out the 100-line Last Defense Academy, an ambitious joint collaboration between Kazutaka Kodaka from Danganronpa and Kotaro Ushikoshi from Zero Escape, the Nonary games. It is every bit of the behemoth advertised, featuring 100 actual endings and also being highly regarded by fans as a bold modern masterpiece that deserves to be played. For all the Rance fans out there, Rance 3 has been released, marking another step forward in the complete translation of the Rance series. A recommendation to all my Yuri fans out there, you might want to check out Love Curse: Find Your Soulmate. Here, you play as a college student who must find her soulmate before a curse takes her life. This is a title I found solely off of social media due to how much fan art and discussion I've seen of the characters online. Lots of gushing online about these heroines and their unique story developments. Meanwhile, for any Otome fans out there, if you enjoyed Bust of Fellows, its sequel was released this year, further continuing the stories of our cast with their own routes. Been hearing lots of great stuff from this title, including the fact that it explains more about the first game's clumsy epilogue, in my opinion. For all of the Somnium fans out there, you might want to check out the latest installment in the franchise, No Sleep for KANADE. I think any sci-fi visual novel fan, especially those who like science adventure games like Steins Gate, should check out the Somnium series, especially since you can get the games very cheap during discount sales. Meanwhile, Key fans will be happy to know that Air is officially available to purchase, an emotional story featuring a wandering puppeteer searching for the girl in the sky, a mythical individual that his deceased mother wished for him to save. And last but not least, Type Moon fans will be glad to know that Fate Stay Night Hollow Ataraxia is officially available to purchase, a continuation sequel fan disc that explores more of the Fate cast in a lighthearted slice-of-life nature and setting, while also telling a serious story about Shiro, a new character, Bazet Fragmarimitz, and her servant Avenger, as they find themselves trapped in a time loop. An absolute must-play title and an underrated gem, quoted from old fans. And now it's time for the category winners for 2025. To start off, we have the category for Best Horror, and to be quite honest, I don't have a good recommendation for this year. Instead, I would actually recommend checking out Silent Hill F instead. Why this non-random visual novel? Well, did you know it was written by Ryokishi07, the author of Higurashi and Umineko, and that it was also nominated for Best Narrative for the 2025 Game Awards. I haven't played it myself because it's too scary for me personally, but I encourage those who want more of Ryukishi's writing to go play this game. If it wasn't obvious by my previous breakdown of the title, the winner for Best Romance I read this year is White Album 2. I don't think I've ever read a visual novel that tackles love in such a thorough way. White Album 2 goes the extra mile in exploring many different relationships with our main character, not only as a way of appreciating how the partners value each other, but also showing the growth in moving past previous romantic affairs. Each of the heroines has their own way of expressing themselves. Some are more subtle, some are more selfish, and some are more compassionate. And for as much as these characters act in very loving ways, those same actions can be hurtful too, to their partner, to others around them, and themselves. White Album 2 handles these aspects of its characters well, while also being very dramatic and entertaining as a romance soap opera. And finally, speaking purely of emotional gut reactions, all of these girls are just extremely attractive, charming, and passionate, and that itself holds its own weight too. And now, my personal favorite visual novel of 2025 is honestly two titles: White Album 2 and Hentai Prison. Both of them are just extremely good, okay? White Album 2 taps into everything I could have ever wanted from a drama romance title. It's packed full of passionate love while also showing the raw emotions underneath. I want to see those intimate scenes and those explosive breakdowns. The story also doesn't suffer terribly from bad melodrama too. There are logical, motivating reasons on why characters act the way they do, both good and bad. It just makes sense to me, and I can always find myself appreciating how well set up everything is. There's also the fact that I don't hate any character in here. They're all likable and well written in their own special way. Side note, I never talked about this in its own section, but the music in here is just so good. There's lots of great tracks in here. White Album has always been a top song, but Toro Kanai Koi just rocks too. Meanwhile, Hentai Prison has just been a fantastic caper crime prison break thriller, an exhilarating ride with tons of soulful ideas and messages. It takes on such a momentous task of exploring the inner workings of people in this criminal system. Yes, most of them are unusual and strange, but there's always something lying at their core, whether it's internal voids, past traumas, or past mistakes. How Henpri describes them, their stories, and their ordeals got me really invested into them, and it's all done so in very interesting, unconventional ways. Believe me, I would have never expected a story like this to have an entire story arc dedicated to eroge game development as a way to express oneself while also tackling the use of censorship to suppress society. Henpri is such a bold visual novel, and it's one hell of a story I want people to read. And with that, that wraps up the year of 2025. Super excited for the next year, both in upcoming videos I want to push out and new exciting visual novels as well. Feel free to tell me what you've read this year or what you're excited for next year. If you want more tier list videos like these, I've got plenty more, and you can start with this one over here or check out a special unique video over here. As always, I would like to thank everyone on Patreon for supporting me in covering visual novels. You guys are fantastic, and if you'd like to be a part of that effort, please consider subscribing, and I hope to see you on the next video.